Listeners' discretion advised. This is an R-rated film, and the novel is also R-rated. We will do our best to control the extreme language and illicit scenes, but please be advised before you listen to the podcast. May the power of Christ compels you. May the power of Christ compels you. May the power of Christ compels you.
I'm Steph.
And I'm Ange.
We're
Nerdazons.
It feels so weird doing, like, you do intros so well. I'm sure all of our listeners here are gonna love it. And I feel weird when I do the intro. I just, my voice isn't as emotive as yours.
No, but you're still cute when you do it. Because you try so hard that I can see your little brain ticking over.
You're making me embarrassed.
Luckily, no one else can see how red you are.
Oh, I know. Okay. This episode was my choice. It was the Exorcist book versus the movie. And the reason I chose this is because years ago I worked with someone who, when I was talking about horror films and how much I really liked them and how much I really loved the Exorcist film, she told me that when she was younger, obviously it was just before the movie came out, she read the book and she said it was that horrifying. She threw it across the room. And I've heard other stories about, people back in the 70s when they were reading the book, that it was pretty horrendous.
Well, yeah, I was telling Mum that we were doing this and she said that book, oh my God, that book was the scariest thing I'd ever read. I had to literally toss it in the bin. I had nightmares for days.
Right? So I'm like, okay, I know what I'm choosing. So
which one are we going to start off with? The movie or the book?
I actually think that we should start with the movie. And the reason why I'm saying this for all listeners, because we're podcast, for all listeners out there, the reason why I'm saying this is because I feel that most people are exposed to the movie before they are the book. Mm-hmm. And if you are exposed to the movie and you really like the movie, it's a different take on the book, which we'll get into. So let's start with the movie. The Exorcist, 1973. When a 12-year-old girl is possessed by a mysterious entity, her mother seeks the help of two priests to save her.
Yeah. Okay, so when we watched this one, Ange actually had a sleepover and my mum hadn't watched this movie in a really long time, so she was like, okay, because movies back then are very high in their dialogue, I did get a little bit bored in the beginning in the fact that I'm like, what are they saying? Like, I felt like an old lady. I'm like, no.
I know, you kept getting up and it was just like, when you do that meme where you put your hands on your face, like, and I had to keep pausing ADHD. It. Yeah, which is understandable, but it's definitely a very strong dialogue-driven story. And you really do need to listen to what's happening in the slower scenes in order to understand why Reagan is the way she is. Mm-hmm. Or else you miss out, you miss out wondering why she goes from, being tied up into a bed from being in a hospital. You just have to pay attention to the dialogue. But it is dialogue, I feel, that it doesn't age well because it's a different type of... It's not like English that we speak now. It's really sort of... I feel it's a bit more traditional English.
It's very old to me.
Yeah, so if you're not used to it, then... Of course it's going to be difficult.
But, okay, can we discuss Reagan?
Yes, please.
And how of an incredible actress she is.
Yeah, Linda Blair. Yes. So she was amazing. Even from the very first time you see her, she was doing quite graphic scenes for a young girl to be doing and acting out in. And to go from an angelic little girl to a literal demon was incredible, and especially for her considering she had no acting background. So fun fact, she actually got that role because she was meant to go to a netball game, and then I think that the game was cancelled, and then she ended up going to this audition and got the job. So that's pretty freaking amazing.
That is. And I've got a fun fact too.
Ooh.
Did you know that this was the first ever R-rated film to be up for nomination for an Oscar?
No, I did not, but it deserves it.
So this, including inflation, this is one of the biggest movies for profit ever, and for an R-rated film.
That's awesome. And I'll say it again, it deserves it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So just like your zombie story, I have a fun story for this on how I was first introduced to this film. I actually hated it and I was petrified. I was quite young. Like, I think I was still in primary school. I was really, really young. And I remember that...
So what you get at that age?
Honestly, like, my older brothers and sisters and godmother, if they babysat us, it was horror films that were on. I can still remember being scared of, you know, in Urban Legends 1 or 2, the film, anyway, someone like comes out from under the car and slices the back of your tendon. I still remember that when I was a kid and I freaked out. Anyway, I think I got desensitized by high school. That's all I'm saying. But back to the story. I remember, I'm pretty sure my older sister was babysitting us. You know, we got sent off to bed early because we were like quite young. And my bedroom was at the very end of the hall, and it quite often creaked a bit there. So I was freaked out.
Sounds creepy.
I know, it's scary. Anyway, so I was creeped out, and I wanted to crawl down to my twin brother's like bed because I was scared. And then I remember I called down there, and he shared a room with one of my older brothers, and he's like, get out, you know, go away. And then I was so scared to go back up the end of the hall that I just remember sitting in like behind a wall that was near the TV, and it was dark. Like, you know, my older sisters and brothers did it right. They flicked all the lights off when it came to watching a horror film in the entire house. And I just remember sitting behind this like wall, and I turned, but I happened to turn and see the screen. It was just all red because it was the cross scene. And I just remember looking away and like, I'm like, okay, just stay here. Like, someone's going to come home soon. Then I can go to the bedroom. Like, I can go back to my own bed when someone's in that, like when my older sister comes into bed, because I shared a room with her. And it was just, I was like, anyway, so I was actually really petrified of this film as a kid. And then to continue on from that story, as I got a bit older, my godmother, it's like one of her absolutely favorite horror films of all time. And she always watched it. I think I must have watched this film like 20 times before I even hit high school. And I remember, I know. What an upbringing I had. And then I remember when, like, after that incident, she made me rewatch it, and I was so scared, and I was like just sitting there like this to try and, you can't see me, but I would sit there with my hands on my temples to try and like slightly cover my eyes with my fingers. And then I eventually figured out there was a pattern in this film, which I told you the pattern, and it kind of makes it less scary. So the pattern with this film is every time someone left the house and, you know, the mum would close the door, something would happen, be it that Reagan comes down the stairs or you hear banging upstairs or something like that. And then I think I just eventually desensitized to the film after that when I figured it out.
Wow.
So that was a very long history into me watching horror films as a kid.
No, but I love how passionate you are about it.
I just had to tell you that I was terrified of this film before.
Watching it with you, once, you know, it all started happening, I actually started laughing because all I could think of was Scary Movie 2, especially when she like urinates.
Yeah.
And then and then it just keeps going and going and going. It kind of lessened it for me.
Yes.
But also the makeup is incredible.
There's like,
however, it does age now. Like, if you looked at that, going in, me watching it for the very first time, I'm like, yeah, okay, this is clearly fake, but I can still see how incredible that is because of the fact that for its time, yeah.
But like, I think, and again, I've said this many times, I love 70s and 80s horror films. And what I love the most about.
Did you say that you do like 80s and 70s horror films?
Haven't I mentioned this? I should mention this again. But the biggest thing that I like about that is that they took the time to do the makeup. They took the time to build the sets, and like it was all prosthetics and like acting and like all of that stuff. And I like that they did, even though it looks hokey now when you're a bit older, but it's just like it just looks so much better than CGI.
Yes, I agree.
But even now, I still think Reagan's face as a demon, it still holds. Like you can see like statue, when you go and buy busts of like characters and things for display, you can find her bust like that, like of her face or scarred. And I think that still holds. The thing that I feel ages with this film is it's dialogue heavy. And I think if they need the dialogue to move the story on and really set the feel. But if you're not into that, then it's hard to stay interested in the film.
I like all different kinds of movies. Like I do find, action movies are a lot more easier to watch. However, I can watch dialogue heavy movies. But this one, it kind of ruined it for me because I kept going back to Scary Movie 2 because I'd watched that so many times that it kind of ruined it for me. But this is incredible with the makeup and all this kind of stuff is the fact that they literally had to refrigerate her room to make it feel like it was that cold.
Wow.
And like the fact that how could they have made her go upside down? They obviously, I don't know, flipped the camera around and they probably had like a gymnast or something doing that. But that was, whoa.
Yeah, yeah. And
yes.
Just to build on that.
Found out while watching this movie is the power of Christ compels you is not mentioned in the book.
Which I honestly feel that it was, but I think it's because I've watched the film so many times that I feel like it must be in the book.
That's kind of like how we felt with The Fly. Do you remember everybody mentioned that The Fly was black and white, the original Fly, when it wasn't?
Yeah.
And I did get this, I did actually listen to the book again. Because first time I read it and listened, but the second time I fully listened while I was, flying and things. And I tried to make note and not once. And then I also, verified it on Google.
Wow. Look at you doing all your, fact checks.
I know, right? This never happened.
But to build on your point on them freezing her room, William, or known as Billy Friedkin, was the director. And he was quite known for being unethical in some of his motives to get the particular shot. The shots always turned out amazing, but you wouldn't be able to do the things that he did to get that. And that is one reason why I feel you can't recreate this, because they were genuine shots. I'll go into that. So, for instance, he would actually fire guns off behind actors. Yeah, right. So he'd actually fire a gun off behind an actor to get their reaction of jumping. And he would tell Linda Blair, hey, I'm going to fire. It's like she'd be the only one who'd know because she's not allowed to jump either. So there's no way you'd be able to fire a gun behind someone's head to make them jump. The scene where Reagan slaps her mum across the face and she goes flying to the wall, and then Reagan drags the cupboard and closes the door on her. I think it was just after the cross scene that she does that. So when she flies across the room, you see her screaming, but she's holding her head. Friedkin actually talked to the guy who was pulling the rope. He would have to pull her to sort of motion her, her body was doing it. He actually spoke to her and said to him that he needs to yank her as hard as he can to make it look real. So really pull her. And she was actually injured during that shot. So when you see her crying, she's actually in pain because she got ripped across the room. And then my last favorite point that I told you about when we were watching the film is the scene when, so it's kind of the first scene that defines belief, I think, in her mum and the adults, that there's something a bit more than just a neurological problem with her, and that's when she's flipping up and down on the actual bed. So she had a lace, like a piece of lace around her waist, and then there was a harness around her body. So there was a malfunction. I think the lace had dropped, and so the whole harness was on against her skin. And so when she's screaming, "Please make it stop," she's actually screaming to the director to stop because she was in agony. And then you can actually find this. I think I found the video and I showed you, I recorded it. And you can see she's like, as soon as they stop it, she's just holding her back and she's crying because she's in so much pain. Like, that is why I'm saying that this film could never really be remade, because the scenes and emotions that they've used in this are legitimate emotions from the actors and actresses. Like, they're actually them in pain and crying.
And the fact that when the little girl would go out, Reagan, on the streets, people genuinely thought that she was possessed, and she had such a hard time in her life.
I don't know if you remember back from our Omen episode that I watched a series called Cursed Films, and it was released on Shudder Entertainment, which I'm pretty sure was like, it's a horror streaming site.
So many ads for that, and I'm just like, Andrew would love that. Andrew would love that.
Well, a friend of mine got it, and they actually said it's really not worth it. So I'm like, and like, yeah, like, and I mean, the services that I use have all the horror stuff on it anyway. So, but anyway,
I'm sorry.
So Cursed Films, The Exorcist was also an episode on that series, and they got Linda Blair to talk in that series, which was really, really good. And she even said the same thing, she was horribly stigmatized as a child and she was bullied. Even that much that she had to have bodyguards assigned to her. And even to this day, she will never talk about that part of her life in an interview. So it's pretty insane. Like, she kind of choked up a little bit and she's like, I won't talk of that. And she like cut that part of the interview dead, even on this Cursed Films. She was victimized because she acted in a film. What could have been an amazing acting career for her, it really turned her away from that industry. But she now actually runs a rescue dog business, which is really cool. So it's really awesome.
She did such an amazing work. This movie is incredible, and it's heartbreaking to know that she was such an amazing actress that we'll never see her in a role like this again.
Yeah. I mean, she does cameos. I'm pretty sure she did quite a few episodes in Supernatural.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't really seen her cameo in anything else, but I do know that she did cameo in that. But, it was a horror series. It was one of the first sort of horror series to make it on mainstream TV when it came out, which is why I liked it originally. But, of course, they were going to get her.
Started watching it with the first few episodes, and I'm like, this is genuinely scary.
I really loved it. Like, it was right up my alley in high school. Like, I was really into horror films at that time, and I'm like, oh, this series is great. And then, it has its moments.
Oh, sorry, I got off track. That's unlike me.
It definitely doesn't sound like you. So that Shudder Cursed Films episode was actually really quite interesting. I didn't know this, but do you remember the scene when she has to go and get like all the medical treatments, like the MRI scans and everything like that? And the doctor, and you see, and it looks so graphic, I have to say, even for the 70s, when you see the needle go through her neck. Yeah. Did you know that was actually a real doctor?
What?
So the director actually went to a hospital that specialized in those treatments. And then I think he asked to shadow them while they were performing those treatments, and then ended up just recording them. And then when you watch the scene, so there's a nurse that kind of like holds Reagan's head in place. That guy actually turned out to be a killer in real life. Like, he was a murderer. Yeah. So it was kind of like The Exorcist rode off of that story. Like, it boosted The Exorcist so much more than the amazing work that the PR lady did, which I'm going to get into. But this guy, so apparently, like, you know, there was just a lot of background checks because someone had gone missing, but like, they filmed their scenes, and then just a few months after that, they found out that the girl who'd gone missing, the young woman, was actually found in his home. And then he was arrested because he'd killed this girl. And it's like, now it's labeled that The Exorcist has a murderer in the actual movie.
Wow.
So it added to the cursed, like, stigma. And then another curse that they say with this film is at the very beginning of the film, when they had everything built, all the sets actually caught fire, but Reagan's room was the only one untouched. So they brought in a real Jesuit priest to bless the set after that before they continued, because, you know, everything burnt except that room.
Wow.
Yeah. And then my last point that I thought was really interesting, because I feel like we never touched this part in, like, our film reviews. So the PR team was pretty phenomenal, right? The advertising they did for The Exorcist before the movie came out, it had people fainting in the line before they even saw it. Like, they had massive billboards out, you know, that was like, don't go and see this film. They had, like, trailers or advertisements that would flash, and it's like, if you see this, you're gonna die, or you're gonna faint, or you're gonna vomit. And, like, people really started to believe that, you know, when people were coming out of the cinema and they were vomiting or passing out, like, it just, they recorded that, and then that built the hype up even more. Yeah, it's crazy. And the PR lady, she was told that she had to create fear in the audience in order to sell the film. And I'm like, you did 100%, if not more, to do your job.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty amazing, right? Okay, so because I know we're going to have to start talking about the book and crossover, is there anything further that you want to talk about on the movie alone?
No, not by itself.
Okay, so how many movie reels do you give this?
I give it a 4 because it was still pretty scary, but unfortunately I had Scary Movie 2 in my head.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was very dialogue heavy, but also the English wasn't, it was very olden English, and I had to have subtitles. But
yeah.
And I'm glad I watched it with you, and that, like, you did pause it when you're like, oh, see this bit when Reagan, you know, was going back and forth. And I think I will definitely watch it again, maybe on Halloween, or, you know, a night where I can be like, I'm going to turn all the lights off.
Yeah.
You know, watch it, especially because I watched the movie first, then I read the book, and now I want to go back and watch the movie again after reading the book.
Yeah. So I would give this a 4.7. It is, to me, I feel probably, if not number one, definitely in the top horror films of all time. I feel this cannot be remade. Like, it obviously can, but they'll ruin it and it will never reach the potential that this one had. The reason it's not a complete 5 is because the dialogue doesn't age well, and I feel that's where they're going to lose a lot of newer, younger audiences, is they'll find some scenes great, but then, yeah, they won't be able to get past the dialogue, which is a shame. But yeah, so 4.7 from me. What do you think it got on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm going to go 89%.
Close.
Ooh.
Close. It got 83.
Oh,
I feel like that was like the opposite that you and I had guessed. I think I guessed like 83, but it was like 89.
Yeah.
Or maybe I guessed 86. I'm not sure. Anyway, so 83%. I do feel this rating really should be higher, especially because this film sparked so much more in horror films. And it still is one of the very few that can't be remade. Like, you can see a lot get remade and some actually stand pretty good for the remakes, but this one, it's still like, it holds its own. So I feel like it should have been a higher rating than 83. Okay, let's move on to the book. So The Exorcist, 1971. It's a horror novel by American writer William Peter Blatty. The book details the demonic possession of 11-year-old Reagan McNeil, the daughter of a famous actress, and the two priests who attempt to exorcise the demon. So, first of all, I just want to note, before we even get anywhere near it, that the movie came out only 2 years after the book was released. So the book was that big a hit that it had a film within 2 years. Yeah. And, in my opinion, they were both a success.
Absolutely. The beginning, so I listened and read it, and then I actually just read it afterwards. The beginning, first maybe 10 minutes, is hard to get through.
Yeah.
However, it sets, I like the fact now that the beginning of the movie makes sense when they're in Iraq and they dig up this thing, and it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So, like, for our listeners out there, we actually started the book at the same time, just before we watched the film. I actually found this book for free on YouTube. Someone had recorded it from Audible. There's a few moments where it does repeat its words like 3 times or so, but it's really just to get past the copyright. But if you're happy to get through that, it's a free book. You don't have to pay for it. The first 20 minutes, I think it was 20 minutes of the book, or maybe 30, the prologue, that whole scene, that was tough. Even I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to get through this book. And you actually messaged me to stop. And you said you were going to give it a go at reading. I actually kept going. And then once you get into chapter 1, when it's, you know, it's got like all the characters and all the characters there, like you've got Reagan, you've got Chris McNeil, and like William Peter Blatty actually reads this, and he does such an incredible voice. Like, he really can differentiate like Chris McNeil to Reagan. Like, he actually sounds like a little girl, like, and then to the demon. Right? Like, okay, if you guys didn't see our faces, but we were just like, whoa.
Yeah, well, I listened to this when I was at work, when I, you know, was able to, and then I would read it. But for a scary, like for a horror book, I could not put this down.
Right? Like, even I was like, oh, I want to get on, like, because I listen to books to and from my work. It's just the easiest time for me to fit books in with my really busy life schedule. So to me, I was like, oh yeah, I want to get on the bus already and read the next, like, listen to the next part of this book. But yeah, I remember telling you to persevere and get to the chapters, because after that it gets really good. And I think you gave that a go, and then yeah, you were hooked. You couldn't put it down.
And then yeah, I listened, and then the way that he does the demon voice
is so good.
But also, you know, I know that the books and the movies are never going to be exact unless, you know, it's a 20-hour book, a 20-hour movie, etc. But I wish that detective in the book, he had
a lot of scenes.
He had a lot of scenes, exactly. And then, you know, him and the junior priest, you know, had a little side story, all this kind of stuff, whereas in the movie, he was just very forceful and just... not forceful, but he was, you know, this is the rules, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Like, I feel the reason I wanted to do the book second is because, in my opinion, this book was amazing, and it actually brought a new love for this film. And to watch a movie and love a movie, to then go into the book and think, oh my God, the book is just even better. That's why I wanted to do it in this order, because I think it's the way that people have been exposed to it, and you're going to have the same journey. Like, if you really love the film like I did, then you're going to love this book. And the book just really goes in so much more depth. So like you said, the detective, you actually see him solving the case. So in the movie, you just see him come in and like ask a few things and then ask for the like autograph. And then you only really like see him at the end. And it's like, did you let the case go? Like, did you catch... Like, you didn't realize, but in the book, he's actually... Throughout the whole book, he knew something went wrong in Reagan's room, but he couldn't figure it out. And that's why he kept coming back, is because he knew that the director has to have died near Reagan's room. I feel like it was almost stupid introducing him in the film. Like, after listening to the book, it's like, why introduce him for one scene? It just seems like you're not going to continue solving your case.
One little thing that I feel like should have been in the movie that was only in the book was when the demon speaks to the priest and says, "This time you will leave." I feel like that meant that obviously we met, the demon and the priest have met.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense with him being frail. Like, the intro puts into perspective the prologue, which was really hard to listen to. But then it's weird. You got to, like, watch the movie to get the gist of some of it, but then you need to read it to understand that he's actually really weak from a previous encounter from a demon. Mm-hmm. Whereas it doesn't transpose completely in the film, but once you watch and read and see it come together, you're like, oh my God, that's why, like, he's like this. That's why he takes those pills, you know?
Yes. And you're right in the fact that I'm glad I watched the movie first, but it's kind of disappointed me going back to the movie because now I'm like, oh, but that wasn't in there, but
I still think the movie did well. Like, I think for a book to film transition, they cut the right things out to continue the story to go forward. Although there is one thing that I will have to say was difficult to like, well, I wouldn't say difficult to understand, because before I even read the book, the film was fine. It always made sense to me. But then because by the time we had watched it, for our listeners, I think I was about 3 to 4 chapters in. Mm-hmm. And it was right as Chris was starting to take Reagan to the doctors. Mm-hmm. But what you didn't see in the film is there was about 3 or 4 different trips to the doctors. And that's why she snapped, and she's like, well, what are you trying to say? And he's like, well, like, when he was prompting her for, like, bad language, that was the 4th time that they had gone. And that's, you know, the science had slowly started to progress further in Reagan. And then that's why Chris got the, like, you know, she just snapped eventually. And you didn't understand that until you actually read the book and you understood, oh, there was so much more involved in her medical appointments.
2 things. The swearing in this movie, in the book, I was not expecting that.
The first time the C-bomb came out, I was on the bus and I was like, whoa.
I was like, what? And the way that, you know, even the cross scene,
oh my God,
was very difficult for me to listen to because that was way more detailed.
Oh, that was really badly detailed.
But it was very well written.
Yeah, and incredibly descriptive.
But not being super descriptive where, you know, I'm reading Ready Player 2, or I've just finished it now, but that is very descriptive in the fact that I don't care how many blades of grass you stood on, just get to the point, you know. And so I could imagine how it smelt.
Oh, me too.
Yes, they had her projectile vomiting. However, they couldn't go into the movie and do this, but there was, pardon my language, shit and piss everywhere that she had to wear a diaper. And they were constantly, like, changing her bed sheets. But, I mean, I don't think they could have put that in the movie because it wouldn't have transcended.
No. If there's one thing I've noticed about the book is the book does centralize a lot in the character's thoughts. So with the Jesuit priest, it's a lot of his thought process. With the other priest, you know, he's thinking about, oh, okay, it's my time's coming and things like that. Like, and the cop, like, you hear a lot of what he's thinking, and then he has his vocal sentences as well. But back on the descriptive, I wrote a few things down from the very beginning of the book, and, like, just to make note, to show, like, how descriptive it is. So, you know, when people get cataracts, they kind of get like a white glossy film over their eye. So he described this as the membrane of an eggshell over the eyes to describe a cataract. And I'm like, that is the exact description that you need. So you've got the shell, the egg, and then that thin, like, white little membrane. And I'm like, how did we never use this in the past? It was so perfect. Or even when he'd be like the slight squeeze of a hand, and I'm like, I could feel that little squeeze of a hand, you know. And it was just he's an amazing author is all I'm going to say on that. That's one point.
Absolutely. And like either of them, obviously I watched the movie first. I was not expecting that ending of the Jesuit priest sacrificing himself.
Same.
And
but even like the first time I watched it, and really like understood it, because as a kid I was scared quite a lot, but when I watched it and really took the story in, like, yeah, I wasn't expecting it either, but it made so much more, it just seemed so much more noble in the book, because you understood that he wasn't happy, and that really came across too in his character. I sympathized with him more in the book than I did in the movie, and you could just tell he was just a lost soul. He had no joy in life anymore, and he had no faith. Yeah, and it was just, the book was amazing. Like
when his mum died, that was heartbreaking.
Yeah. And like, even, okay, I'm just gonna go back to the author reading this. When he was doing his mum's voice, how amazing was he?
Yeah, he did everybody's voices perfectly. But to me, the best one was when he was the demon and he had that growly, like, gravel voice that it literally gave me shivers down my spine.
Yeah, he just had the right tone in the way he said things. Back to the whole first seed bomb. I think what makes that and swearing in this film and book really like outstanding is because swearing was not a part of everyday language in the 70s, you know. So when they're talking nicely and politely, and then, you know, the C-bomb came out, I was just like, oh wow, you escalated like 20 times, like no swearing to that. And it just made you feel so much more like shocked, because there was no swearing in the book at all at that point.
The doctor, when she went into the doctor and she said, you know, shit, or whatever she said, and they're like, little girls don't say that. You're like, oh my gosh, no, they wouldn't.
No.
Like, and that was, whoa.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this book so much.
Yeah, I really did too. I knew
I'm probably going to read it again.
I would definitely read it again. You know me, I don't like books, and I mean, I'd listen to it again. But I really enjoyed this. I feel like this, reading the book after watching the film so many times, just re-sparked that joy. Well, not joy, I can't say you get joy out of it. Like, just re-sparked the enjoyment of watching this film. It just made me sound creepy when I say joy before. But it just re-sparked the love that you have in what they did for this film. It just, if you love it, you'll love the story even more. It just expands on it. Absolutely. And expands it in a good way. And I would 100% recommend this book, and I am not someone who recommends books.
And because I got the ebook and it had the cover of the movie on it, but I looked at the cover of the actual book. If you don't have the physical book, go look at the cover. It is just got like a ghost figure on it. It is so creepy.
Okay, so what are you going to rate this book out of 5 books? I can't say movie reels. I'm just going to say books.
I'm totally going to give it 4.5.
I'm giving it a 4.5 too.
Yeah, I loved it. It's
not
going to be obviously one of my favorite books, but it is a book that I will read again.
Yeah. I think if I did ever listen to it again, the one, like, this is why it's not getting a higher ranking, is I would just skip past the prologue every time, to be honest. Like, it's thoroughly enjoyable listening to this book,
but you do need to listen to it or read it first to understand
your first time. Absolutely. But if you already know the story, and I mean, if you've already read the book, then you can skip it. Even if you've seen the movie but you haven't read the book, read it. But no, I saying 4.5. I actually think this is our highest book and movie remake. I think every time we've ranked a book to a movie, the movie's always bombed. Yeah. So this is an amazing book to film adaptation. I think as close as you can get. As maybe, I think the only other one we did agree on was Harry Potter 1, because the book was so tiny. Okay, one last question. what do you think this rating got?
I'm going to go, because it's out of 5, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go a 4.7.
Oh, that's a high ranking. It actually got 4.2, which is still like... That's
better than average.
Yeah, that's like 80 to 90%. So actually, if not, no, that's like 90%. So that's a pretty damn good ranking.
Nerdison's Nerdy Notables.
Can I just say, I have just discovered the best thing ever.
What?
It's on ABC2. It's called Staged, and it's got David Tennant and Michael Sheen.
All you listeners out there haven't listened to this. I feel like this is all Steph talks about right now.
Yeah.
To me.
It's such an amazing show. So it's obviously got David Tennant, and it's got both of their partners, and it's all about, it was actually filmed during lockdown. And so what happened was that, none of the arts were going, so they thought of an idea of, hey, let's practice the play via Zoom, and that way, we've got a step above everybody else. And what happened was, it's just got them two just doing banter. It is the funniest thing in the whole entire world. And there's so many cameos. So you've got Dame Judi Dench, you've got Samuel L. Jackson, you've got Phoebe Waller-Bridge, you've got what's her name? The Aussie chick who was also in Lord of the Rings.
Cate Blanchett.
And then one of the funniest things is that they're filming, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge gets on, and David Tennant and Michael Sheen are on the camera, and she's just like, get him off my... Like, I don't ever want to see him again. He's disgusting. And my heart kind of sank, because I'm like, he can't be a bad guy. And I was like, nah, I don't.
Is this about David Tennant or about Michael Sheen?
David Tennant. And so I was like, he can't be a bad guy. Anyway, so Michael Sheen's like, what is going on? And they're fighting. And so Phoebe's like, fine, I'll tell you what happened. I had a role on Broadchurch, and every time I went to the toilet, David Tennant would send me a text message, so that it turned out to be Pavlov's dog, where she goes, every time he sent me a text message, I just had to go to the bathroom all the time. It ruined my career. They called me Shitty Waller-Bridge. and then anyway, you just see him send a text message to her. It goes beep beep, and she just looks at me. She goes, "Fuck you," and he walks away.
That's funny. That's like The Office with Dwight and the
and then
the
he's
mints.
like, "What? Like, oh, I did nothing." I was like, "Oh, that's so good."
That's so funny.
Also, I went on a bit of a shopping spree with books.
Okay.
I bought Stardust, which I've never read, and my friend was like, you're going to love it. So that's exciting for an upcoming episode.
Yes.
I also brought 1984, because I want to read that. Apparently that's really good, and also wouldn't mind doing that as an episode. And then I also brought A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, I was shocked when you told me about that.
It was cheap at the market, and it's only 150 pages.
So when you told me about it,
it's in the movie.
So my partner read it and watched it just because he had to study it, and he said the book is definitely worse than the movie. So prepare yourself.
Yeah,
I haven't seen or read it either.
It's very hard to. It's lots of jargon, and like I think it's the 60s version of like what we would talk now. So it's a little bit hard, but oh my gosh, I know how much you love Stardust. Everybody knows.
I really like the movie,
Stardust.
although I haven't seen the movie since like...
Anyway, you need to read the book. That's all I'm saying.
Well, okay, so now on to my notables, and I think you're going to be proud of me, but I actually started listening to a book.
Which one?
Hang on, let me pull it up, because my best friend, it's her favorite series, and she recommended it to me. I think I had a free credit. I remember when I do the dodgy, I sign up, get my credits, and then I unsign until I listen to the books, and then I wait for the next like promo, because I don't listen enough to warrant
I'm gonna cancel all that out.
Staying membership. So, okay, good, yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, Coach Audible ever sponsor.
Oh my
us.
God, if they did, that would be great. Okay, so my best friend recommended this series because it's her absolute favorite, and it's called Throne of Glass by Sarah J.
I've
Maas.
heard of that.
Yeah,
Is
so I
it good?
started it. I'm up to chapter 5,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty good. Like, it's a really good storyline to begin with. The names, like the obviously because it's all made up, it's fiction, but the names of like people and towns and places were a little bit much for me to remember. But then once I got into the storyline and like who everyone was, I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. So I'm listening to that on my commutes at the moment because I got sick of like my music lately. So I'm like, oh, I remember downloading this ages ago and she recommended it to me. So I started listening to that. And so far I would recommend.
Cool.
And then really all else that I've been doing, I've been incredibly busy with work and study. So I've just been playing a few games when I finish at night to sort of unwind. And I've started playing Pokemon Shield on my Nintendo Switch, and then I've jumped back into finishing Medieval, which was an original PlayStation 1 game, but they redid it for PlayStation 4, but I just never got around to finishing it because when you start a level, there's no like save point in the middle of the level. So if you die right at the end, you have to redo the whole thing. So I end up like stopping when I get to somewhere difficult. And I didn't touch it for months. And then like, yeah, I just started playing it again. So really, that's all I'm doing to unwind between all this stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, well, my foot's still a bit swollen, but getting a little bit better.
Yes. Yes. But
Okay, so should we tell everybody what next month's episodes are? So next month's episodes are going to be Charlie's Angels. I can't wait I love the Cameron Diaz, Lucy Liu, and Drew Barrymore one. Oh, can't wait. And I've never seen the new one.
The new one. Yeah, same. Okay, yeah, I haven't seen that one either.
So hopefully it's good.
Yeah.
And then the other one would be your choice,
which was Judge Dredd, which was in the 80s, and then they redid that, don't quote me, I think like 2017 or something.
Doesn't it have like John Cena or somebody in it?
I can't remember, but I've actually chosen Judge Dredd and RoboCop this year. We've already laid out our designs, and I got confused with when they were all remade. So I do know that they were both done in like the new like 2000s at some point, and then they were both done in like the 80s. So yes, my choice is Judge Dredd. Just Google it. I'm sure you'll find out which ones they are.
Yeah, awesome. Until then,
stay nerdy.